I never believed in love at first sight until Marcus knocked on my door asking for sugar. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, and I was nursing my second cup of coffee while trying to pretend I understood the economics textbook sprawled across my kitchen table. The knock was soft, almost apologetic, like whoever was behind the door wasn't sure they should be bothering me at all. When I opened it, there he stood, tall, with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, wearing a faded blue t-shirt and jeans that had seen better days. His eyes were this warm brown that reminded me of the coffee I'd been drinking. And when he smiled, something inside my chest did this little flip that I didn't quite know how to interpret. "Hey," he said, voice slightly hoarse like he'd just woken up. "I'm Marcus. I just moved in next door, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm trying to make pancakes and I'm completely out of sugar. I was wondering if I could borrow some." I stood there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds, just staring at him. Not because he was asking for sugar, but because something about the way he said it, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other, made me want to invite him in for breakfast instead of just handing him a cup of sugar and sending him on his way. "Of course," I managed to say, stepping back from the door. "Come in, if you want to. I can just grab it for you." He hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. "Thanks. I'm sorry to bother you so early. I'm not really a morning person, but I had this craving for pancakes and figured I'd give it a shot." I led him to the kitchen, acutely aware of the mess I'd left behind. Books scattered across the table, dishes in the sink, my laptop open to a half-finished essay that was due in 2 days. The apartment felt smaller with him in it, but not in a bad way. More like the space had suddenly become more alive. "I'm David," I said, reaching for the sugar container on the counter. "And don't worry about bothering me. I've been staring at the same page for 20 minutes anyway." He glanced at my textbook, then at me. "Economics? Unfortunately, it's not exactly my favourite subject, but it's required for my business minor." "What's your major?" "English literature. I know. Not exactly the most practical choice." Marcus shook his head. "I think that's amazing. I've always been terrible at writing. I can barely manage a grocery list without making it sound awkward." I handed him the sugar, and when our fingers brushed, I felt that same little flip in my chest. "I doubt that's true." "Trust me, it is. Last week I tried to write a thank you note to my landlord for fixing my sink, and it ended up sounding like I was proposing marriage." I laughed, and the sound surprised me. It had been weeks since anything had genuinely made me laugh. "That's actually kind of sweet." Sweet and mortifying. We stood there in my kitchen, him holding my sugar container, me trying to think of something clever to say to keep him there just a little longer. The morning light was streaming through my window, hitting his face in a way that made those brown eyes look almost golden. "So," I said, because the silence was starting to feel loaded with something I wasn't ready to name. "How are you liking the neighbourhood?" "It's good, quiet. I moved here from across town. My old place had these neighbours who apparently thought 3 a.m. was the perfect time to rearrange their furniture." "That sounds awful." It was. But this place feels different, better. More like somewhere I could actually stay for a while. The way he said it made me wonder if he'd been running from something or someone. There was something in his voice, a kind of careful hopefulness, like he was testing the words to see how they felt. "Have you lived here long?" he asked. "About a year. It's not much, but it's mine, you know." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. That's important. I wanted to ask him more about where he'd come from, what had brought him here, whether he was starting over or just moving forward. But there was something fragile about the moment, and I didn't want to push too hard too fast. "Well," he said, lifting the sugar container slightly, "I should probably let you get back to your studying, and I should probably actually make these pancakes before I change my mind." Right, of course. But neither of us moved. We just stood there looking at each other, and I could feel something shifting between us. Something that had nothing to do with borrowed sugar, and everything to do with the way he was looking at me like he was trying to memorize my face. "Marcos," I said, and then stopped, because I didn't know what came next. Yeah? If you need anything else, sugar, flour, whatever, I'm usually home. He smiled, and it was different from the polite smile he'd given me at the door. This one was softer, more real. Thanks, David, I'll remember that. After he left, I stood in my kitchen holding my coffee mug and trying to make sense of what had just happened. It wasn't just that he was attractive, though he definitely was. It was something else. The way he'd looked around my apartment like he was taking note of the details, the way he'd said my name like he was trying it out, the way I'd felt completely comfortable with a stranger standing in my space. I tried to go back to my textbook, but the words just swam on the page. Instead, I found myself thinking about brown eyes and messy hair and the way Marcus had hesitated before stepping into my apartment, like he wasn't sure he was welcome, but hoping he was. It wasn't until later that afternoon, when I heard music coming from next door, that I realised I hadn't gotten my sugar container back. Not that I minded. It gave me an excuse to see him again, though I wasn't quite ready to admit that to myself yet. The music was soft, acoustic. Something I didn't recognise but liked immediately. I could hear him moving around, probably unpacking, probably making his new place feel like home. The walls between our apartments were thin enough that I could hear the scrape of furniture being moved and the occasional thud of a box being set down. I sat at my kitchen table, pretending to study, but really just listening to the sounds of my new neighbour settling in next door and trying not to think about how much I wanted to knock on his door again. On his door again. That evening, I did something I never do. I made dinner for two. Not because I was planning to invite him over, but because I kept imagining what it would be like if he knocked on my door again. If he needed something else. If maybe this time, instead of just borrowing sugar, he'd stay long enough for us to actually talk. I was stirring pasta sauce when I heard his door open and close. Footsteps on the stairs. Part of me hoped he was going somewhere that would bring him past my door. But the footsteps faded toward the parking lot. I watched from my window as he walked to a beat-up Honda Civic, grocery bags in hand. Even from 3 stories up, I could see the careful way he moved, like he was thinking about something important. 20 minutes later, he was back. I heard him on the stairs again, heard his keys jingling, heard his door shut. Then, silence. I ate my pasta alone and told myself I was being ridiculous. You don't fall for someone because they ask to borrow sugar. That's not how real life works. That's the kind of thing that happens in movies, in books, in the stories I wrote for my creative writing class, but never shared with anyone because they were too honest about the things I wanted, but didn't know how to ask for. But Wednesday morning, he knocked again. This time, I was ready for it. I'd been listening for his footsteps, for any sign that he might need something else. I opened the door before he could knock a second time, and there he was, looking slightly embarrassed but also amused. "Hi," he said. "So funny thing. I still have your sugar, I noticed. And I made way too many pancakes yesterday. I was wondering if you might want some. I mean, if you haven't eaten yet." I was wearing yesterday's t-shirt and my hair was doing something that could generously be called experimental, but Marcus was looking at me like none of that mattered. Like he was genuinely hoping I'd say yes. I'd love some pancakes. Great. They're still warm. I followed him next door, and stepping into his apartment was like stepping into a completely different world, where my place was cluttered with books and papers and the general chaos of someone who studied too much and cleaned too little. His was sparse but intentional. A few boxes still stacked against the wall, but everything else was placed with care. A small table by the window with 2 chairs, a bookshelf with maybe 20 books, all of them well worn, a guitar leaning against the couch. "You play?" I asked, nodding toward the guitar. "A little. It helps me think." The pancakes were perfect, light and fluffy with just the right amount of sweetness. We sat at his small table, morning light streaming through the window, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time breakfast had felt this peaceful. This right. "These are incredible," I said. "My mum's recipe? She always said the secret was to not overmix the batter." Smart woman. She was. The past tense hung in the air for a moment, and I saw something flicker across his face. Not sadness exactly, but something deeper. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Thank you. It's part of why I moved here, actually. Fresh start and all that. I wanted to reach across the table to touch his hand, to offer some kind of comfort, but we barely knew each other and I wasn't sure what the rules were for this kind of thing. Instead, I said, that takes courage. Or desperation. He smiled, but it was shaky around the edges. Some days I'm not sure which. Maybe both. Maybe that's okay. He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I felt that flip in my chest again. Stronger this time. You're very kind, David. You're very honest, Marcus. We finished breakfast in comfortable silence. The kind that felt like we'd been doing this for months instead of days. When I got up to leave, he walked me to the door, and we stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to end whatever this was. David, he said, and something in his voice made me turn back. Would you like to have dinner sometime? I mean, if you're not busy, if you want to. The question hung between us, and I could see the vulnerability in his eyes. The hope and the fear all tangled up together. It reminded me of the way I felt when I submitted a poem to the literary magazine, knowing it might get rejected, but hoping it might mean something to someone. I'd like that very much. Really, really. His smile was brilliant, and I felt something settle in my chest, something that felt like possibility. Tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow. I spent the rest of that day pretending to study, but really just replaying our conversation over and over. The way he'd said my name, the way he'd talked about his mother, the way he'd asked me to dinner like it was the most natural thing in the world, but also like it was the most important question he'd ever asked. That night, I lay in bed listening to him play guitar through the thin walls. The melody was soft and complicated, full of starts and stops, like he was working something out. I wondered if he was thinking about tomorrow, if he was as nervous as I was, if he could feel the same electric current that seemed to run between us whenever we were in the same room. Thursday evening couldn't come fast enough. He cooked. Actually cooked, like someone had taught him how to make things from scratch instead of just heating up frozen dinners. Chicken with rosemary and lemon. Roasted vegetables that still had some bite to them. Bread that smelled like it had come from a bakery but had clearly been made in his small kitchen. Where did you learn to cook like this? I asked, taking another bite of what might have been the best meal I'd had in months. My mom again. She said if I was going to be on my own, I needed to know how to take care of myself properly. She raised you well. She tried. Sometimes I think she worried I was too quiet, too content to be alone. She used to say I needed to let people in more. And do you let people in? He considered this, twirling his fork through the vegetables. I'm trying to learn how. The honesty of it hit me square in the chest. Here was someone who was actively working on becoming the kind of person who could connect with others, who could build something real instead of just existing in his own space. What about you? He asked. Are you close with your family? My parents, yes, they live about 3 hours away. They're good people, but they worry about me. Think I spend too much time alone with my books. Do you? Probably, but I like quiet. I like having space to think. Me too, but sometimes quiet can become lonely without you realizing it. Is that what happened to you? Maybe. I spent so much time taking care of my mum those last few months that when she was gone, I didn't really know how to be around people anymore, how to have normal conversations about normal things. This feels pretty normal to me. Does it? He looked genuinely surprised. The best kind of normal. After dinner, we moved to his couch. He made coffee, and we talked about books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, the strange ways life could surprise you when you weren't paying attention. The conversation flowed like we'd known each other for years instead of days, and I found myself noticing things. The way he gestured when he got excited about something. The way he listened like every word I said mattered. The way he looked at me when he thought I wasn't looking back. It was getting late when he said, I should probably let you go. You probably have studying to do. Probably, but I didn't move from the couch. "David," he said, and his voice was softer now. "Can I ask you something? Anything. When you opened your door that first morning, did you feel it too?" My heart started beating faster. Feel what? Like something was shifting. Like maybe this was the beginning of something important. I looked at him, at this man who'd walked into my life asking for sugar and somehow made everything feel possible again. "Yes," I said. "I felt it too," I said. "I felt it too." He reached for my hand then, fingers intertwining with mine like they belonged there. His palm was warm and slightly rough, and when his thumb brushed across my knuckles, I felt that same electric current I'd been trying to ignore for days. "I've been thinking about this since Tuesday," he said quietly. "About you. About how I haven't felt this way about anyone in a really long time." "How long?" "Years, maybe ever." He paused, looking down at our joined hands. "I know that probably sounds crazy. We barely know each other." "It doesn't sound crazy. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize I'm just the weird guy next door who doesn't know how to talk to people." "Marcus," I shifted closer to him on the couch, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "You're not weird. You're thoughtful and kind, and you make incredible pancakes. And you're here, really here, in a way that most people aren't." "What do you mean?" "When you listen, you actually listen. When you ask how I am, you wait for the real answer. When you look at me, I feel like you're seeing something worth seeing." His breath caught slightly. "Because you are worth seeing." The space between us felt charged with possibility. I could hear his heartbeat, or maybe that was mine. Could smell the faint scent of his cologne mixed with coffee and something that was just him. "David," he whispered, and the way he said my name made my chest tighten. "Yeah? I really want to kiss you right now." My heart stopped, then started again, double time. "Then why don't you?" He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. But pulling away was the last thing on my mind. When his lips touched mine, it was soft and tentative at first, like he was asking a question. I answered by kissing him back, my free hand coming up to rest against his chest. The kiss deepened and I felt something inside me unlock, something I'd been keeping carefully guarded without even realizing it. This was what I'd been waiting for without knowing I was waiting. This connection, this rightness, this feeling like all the pieces of myself were finally falling into place. When we broke apart, we stayed close, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. "Wow," I said softly. "Yeah, wow." "I should probably go," I said, even though going was the last thing I wanted to do. "You should," he agreed, but his hand tightened around mine. "But I don't want to. I don't want you to either." We stayed like that for another few minutes, just holding each other before I finally found the strength to stand up. He walked me to the door, and we stood there like we had that first morning, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow." But tomorrow turned into the next day, and the next day after that. We fell into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Morning coffee at my place because I had the better coffee maker. Lunch together when our schedules aligned. Dinner at his place because he was the better cook. Late nights talking about everything and nothing until one of us fell asleep on the other's couch. It was during one of those late nights about 2 weeks after that first kiss that things shifted again. We'd been watching a movie, some romantic comedy that neither of us was really paying attention to, when I noticed him looking at me instead of the screen. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how I used to think I was pretty good at being alone. I had my routines, my space, my way of doing things. And then you showed up and made me realize I wasn't just alone, I was lonely. And now I can't imagine going back to that. to not having you here, not talking to you every day, not knowing what you're thinking about or how your day was or whether you remembered to eat lunch. I remembered today. Good. He smiled, but there was something serious in his eyes. David, I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. Okay. I'm falling in love with you. The words hung in the air between us, and I felt everything inside me go very still. Not because I was scared or surprised, but because hearing him say it out loud made something click into place. I know it's fast, he continued, rushing now like he was afraid I'd run. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, and maybe it's too soon to say that, but I can't keep pretending it's not true. You've become the best part of my day. The person I want to tell things to, the reason I actually look forward to waking up in the morning. Marcus. And I know you might not feel the same way yet, and that's okay. I just needed you to know that this isn't casual for me. This isn't just some fun thing to pass the time. You matter to me. You matter to me more than I know how to handle sometimes. Marcus, stop. He went quiet, watching me with those brown eyes that had become so familiar, so dear. I love you too, I said simply. The relief that washed over his face was so profound I almost laughed. Instead, I reached for him, pulling him closer until I could cup his face in my hands. I love you too, I repeated. I love the way you hum while you cook. I love how you remember things I tell you about my classes, my friends, my family. I love that you moved here to start over and somehow made space for me in that new beginning. David! I love that you asked to borrow sugar and ended up giving me everything I didn't know I was missing. This time when he kissed me, it was different. Deeper, more certain. Full of promise instead of question. I melted into him, into the feeling of being completely known and completely wanted. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. So, what happens now? Now, we figure it out together. Together sounds perfect. The next morning, I woke up in his bed for the first time. Not because anything dramatic had happened, but because we'd fallen asleep talking, and neither of us wanted to break the spell by making me go back to my own apartment. I opened my eyes to find him already awake, propped up on his elbow, watching me with a soft expression. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. How long have you been awake? Not long. I was just thinking about how different this feels. Different how? Good different. Like maybe I finally found the thing I was supposed to be looking for. I reached for his hand, threading our fingers together. Maybe we found each other. Maybe we did. Outside I could hear the sounds of the city waking up. Cars starting, people heading to work, life moving forward in all its ordinary complexity. But inside this room, with morning light filtering through his curtains and his hand warm in mine, everything felt extraordinary. I should probably go get ready for class, I said reluctantly. Probably. But I don't want to. Then don't. Stay here. Skip class. We'll make pancakes and drink too much coffee and figure out what comes next. I can't skip class. You can't? Okay, I could, but I shouldn't. But you want to. I want to. Then stay. So I did. We made pancakes and drank too much coffee and talked about the future like it was something we were building together instead of something that was just happening to us. And for the first time since I'd moved to this city, to this apartment, to this life that sometimes felt too small for all the things I wanted, everything felt exactly the right size. Size? That's how it started. A borrowed cup of sugar and a knock on the door that changed everything. Marcus and I have been together for 3 years now, and sometimes I still can't believe how one simple Tuesday morning reshaped my entire world. We moved in together officially 6 months after that first dinner, though honestly, we were practically living together already. The walls between our apartments couldn't contain what we'd built. People ask me sometimes if I believe in fate, in meant to be, in all those romantic notions that sound beautiful in movies but feel impossible in real life. I used to be skeptical. But then I think about Marcus running out of sugar on the exact morning I needed a reason to stop staring at my economics textbook. I think about how he could have knocked on any door in our building, but he chose mine. I think about how we both could have been too shy, too careful, too afraid to let something real develop between us. Love doesn't always announce itself with fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it starts quiet, with borrowed sugar and shared pancakes, and the gradual realization that you found someone who makes ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Sometimes it begins with a neighbour who needs something sweet and ends with a heart that's finally found its home. So if you're listening to this and wondering if love like this actually exists, if connections this deep are real or just stories we tell ourselves, I'm here to tell you they are. Keep your door open. Answer when someone knocks. You never know what beautiful beginning might be waiting on the other side.